You're sitting there looking at your life, and one question won't leave your mind. Why the hell aren't things happening for you? Why does it seem like everyone around you is moving forward, evolving, achieving, while you stay stuck in the same place? You work hard, you put in effort, you do everything they tell you to do, but the results just don't come. And then you look around and see people who seem less deserving than you, living the life you've always dreamed of. It eats away at you from the inside, doesn't it? That feeling of injustice, like the world owes you something that never comes. Well, I have news for you. News that's going to hurt at first, but could be the key to everything changing in your life. This news is simple and devastating at the same time. Nobody owes you anything. Absolutely nothing. Not the universe, not God, not your parents, not your boss, not your friends. Nobody. Napoleon Hill spent decades studying the principles of success, interviewed over 500 successful people of his time, and reached a conclusion that most people refuse to accept. The world doesn't operate based on what you deserve. The world operates based on what you produce, what you deliver, what you build with your own hands. And that's the fundamental difference between those who win in life and those who spend their entire existence waiting for someone to come save them. While losers complain about the world's unfairness, winners are out there building their own destiny. While the weak wait for recognition, the strong create value. While the emotionally dependent keep demanding attention and care from others, the independent are forging their own inner strength. This is the most cruel and most liberating duality that exists. On one side, you have those who live based on what others should do for them. On the other side, you have those who have taken total responsibility for their own existence. And you know what the hardest truth about all this is? Life is going to teach you this lesson anyway. It's going to teach you the hard way, through pain, through disappointment. Every time you place your happiness in someone else's hands, every time you expect someone to solve your problems, every time you act like the world has an obligation to give you what you want, life slaps you in the face. And that slap hurts. It hurts because it destroys the illusion. It hurts because it forces you to wake up. But that pain doesn't come to destroy you. That pain comes to forge you. Every disappointment you feel when someone doesn't meet your expectations is an opportunity to grow. Every time you realize that nobody is going to save you is an invitation to become your own hero. Every moment of loneliness, every criticism you receive, every door that closes in your face, none of this is punishment. It's training. It's life preparing you to become someone who no longer needs to beg for approval, attention, or opportunities. Napoleon Hill discovered that there's a pattern among all the successful people he studied. All of them, without exception, went through a moment of awakening, a moment when they stopped looking outward, expecting salvation, and started looking inward, seeking solutions. All of them understood that the power was in their own hands, not in the hands of others. And all of them transformed that understanding into action. The difference between you and the people who are where you'd like to be isn't talent, isn't luck, isn't connections. The difference is that they stopped demanding from the world and started delivering to the world. They understood that the only person who really owes you something is yourself. You owe yourself honesty. You owe yourself discipline. You owe yourself courage. You owe yourself action. Think about it. How many times have you gotten irritated because someone didn't give you the attention you thought you deserved? How many times have you felt betrayed because someone didn't help you the way you expected? How many times have you blamed circumstances, people, the government, the economy, anything external for your results? Every time you did that, you were giving your power away. You were saying that your life depends on factors you don't control. But here's the truth that will set you free. You control much more than you imagine. You control your choices. You control your actions. You control your reactions. You control how much you dedicate yourself, how much you study, how much you develop. You control whether you'll give up or persist. You control whether you'll cry about difficulties or use them as fuel. And you who made it this far, you who are absorbing every word of this video, have already proven something to yourself. You've proven that you're not like the majority who give up at the first difficulty. But what comes next will connect all of this in a way that could change your life forever. Stay with me, because we're getting to the point where everything makes sense. Most people stop at this exact moment. They hear the truth, feel the impact, but don't have the courage to go all the way. But you're not most people. You're different. And what I'm about to reveal will show you exactly how to transform this understanding into concrete results. Napoleon Hill discovered that there's a universal law that governs all aspects of life. This law says that you receive from life exactly what you give to life. No more, no less. If you give mediocrity, you receive mediocrity. If you give excellence, you receive excellence. If you give energy, you receive energy. If you give value, you receive value. This law is relentless and impartial. It doesn't care about your excuses, your fears, your justifications. It simply works. And here's where it gets interesting. Most people reverse this equation. They want to receive first and then give. They want to be recognized before doing something worthy of recognition. They want to be respected before becoming respectable. They want to be loved before becoming lovable. They want to be rich before creating wealth for others. This reversal is the root of all human frustration. Winners understand that the equation works in reverse. First you give, then you receive. First you become, then you conquer. First you build value, then you reap the rewards. This is the difference between poverty mindset and abundance mindset. Poverty mindset always demands first. Abundance mindset always delivers first. But there's a paradox here that needs to be understood. When you truly stop expecting others to give you something, when you stop demanding, when you stop waiting, something magical happens. People start wanting to give you things. Opportunities start appearing. Resources start flowing. Why? Because you changed your energy. You went from scarcity energy to abundance energy. And the world responds to your energy, not to your words. Think of someone you truly admire. It could be an entrepreneur, an artist, a leader, anyone who has your admiration. Now answer me, does this person demand recognition from others? Does this person complain that the world doesn't value them? Does this person wait for someone to come solve their problems? Of course not. They're too busy creating, building, delivering value, solving problems, being useful to the world. And here's a truth that few have the courage to speak. The people who keep demanding attention, recognition, and care from others are exactly the people who least deserve these things. Why? Because they're not contributing. They're just consuming. They're emotional parasites. They suck energy from others without giving anything in return. On the other side, people who never demand anything from anyone, who are always giving, always contributing, always adding value. These are the people everyone wants to be around. These are the people who receive opportunities. These are the people who are respected, admired, and sought after. This is another fundamental duality. There are givers and takers. Givers build empires. Takers build emotional prisons. Givers attract abundance. Takers attract scarcity. Givers create genuine connections. Takers create toxic relationships based on obligation and guilt. But don't be fooled. Being a giver doesn't mean being a pushover. It doesn't mean accepting anything. It doesn't mean having no boundaries. It doesn't mean letting yourself be exploited. It means being strategic. It means choosing where, when, and to whom you'll give your energy. It means understanding that when you give genuine value to the world rewards you proportionally. Napoleon Hill called this sowing and reaping. You first sow, then reap. You first invest, then receive dividends. You first build, then inhabit. This is the natural order of things. Trying to reverse this order is like trying to harvest before planting. It simply doesn't work. And if this video is making you reflect up to this point, if it's stirring something inside you, hit that like button. Subscribe to Prosperity Revealed now, because the next videos will transform you even more. Join this community of people who decided to stop waiting and start building. Now, I'm going to tell you something that might seem contradictory to everything I've said so far, but is actually the missing piece of the puzzle. There's a difference between not expecting anything from others and not needing anyone. There's a difference between emotional independence and isolation. There's a difference between self-confidence and arrogance. Truly strong people aren't afraid to admit when they need help. They're not afraid to ask for advice. They're not afraid to recognize their limitations. But there's a crucial difference. They ask, they don't demand. They seek, they don't wait. They position themselves as partners, not as victims. When you understand that nobody owes you anything, you completely change how you relate to the world. You stop being an emotional beggar and become a trader. You stop demanding and start exchanging. You stop waiting for favors and start creating value that naturally attracts collaboration. Think about the difference between these two approaches. In the first, you approach someone and say, "You should help me because I need your help." In the second, you approach and say, "I have something valuable to offer, and I believe we can both benefit." Feel the difference in energy? The first approach puts you in a position of inferiority and desperation. The second puts you in a position of strength and collaboration. Napoleon Hill discovered that all great human achievements were the result of collaboration between people who saw themselves as partners, not as creditors or debtors. These people understood that nobody owed anything to anyone, but that everyone could benefit from working together toward common goals. And here's a deep psychological truth. When you stop acting like the world owes you something, when you take total responsibility for your life, something interesting happens with the people around you. They start respecting you more. They start seeking you out more. They start wanting to do things for you spontaneously. Why? Because you stopped draining their energy with demands and expectations. You became someone who adds value to interactions, not someone who sucks energy from interactions. You became someone people want to have around, not someone they avoid to not hear complaints. This is life's most beautiful irony. When you stop desperately needing love from others, you become more lovable. When you stop desperately needing recognition from others, you become more respectable. When you stop desperately needing approval from others, you become more attractive. It's a paradox, but that's how it works. But here's where many people get lost. They confuse not demanding anything from others with having no standards. They confuse emotional independence with accepting any treatment. This is a grave mistake. When you understand that nobody owes you anything, you also understand that you don't owe anything to anyone beyond what you choose to give. This means you have total right to establish boundaries. You have total right to choose who you relate to. You have total right to say no when someone tries to take advantage of your generosity. In fact, establishing healthy boundaries is a fundamental part of understanding that nobody owes anything to anyone. The difference is that you don't establish these boundaries with anger, resentment, or sense of injustice. You establish these boundaries with clarity, firmness, and inner peace. You're not demanding that others treat you well. You're simply choosing not to accept treatments that don't add value to your life. Napoleon Hill observed that successful people have one thing in common. They are extremely selective about who they allow in their inner circle. They don't do this out of arrogance or superiority. They do this for energy protection. They know that their energy is their most valuable resource, and they are discerning about where they invest that energy. So when someone criticizes you for having high standards, when someone accuses you of being too demanding, when someone tries to make you feel guilty for not accepting crumbs, remember, that person is trying to convince you to lower your standards so they don't have to raise theirs. That person wants you to accept less so they can give less. And here we enter territory that few have the courage to explore. The truth is, there's a silent war happening around you. A war between those who want to evolve and those who want you to stay small. Between those who want to grow and those who want to keep you at their level. People who are stagnant in life hate seeing other people progress. It makes them feel inadequate, lazy, failed. So instead of being inspired by your growth and using it as motivation to grow too, they try to pull you back down. They do this through criticism, sarcasm, jokes, subtle discouragement, creating drama. anything to drain your energy and distract you from your focus. When you understand that nobody owes you anything, you also understand that others' criticisms say much more about them than about you. The person who criticizes you for having ambitions is revealing that they gave up on their own ambitions. The person who criticizes you for having high standards is revealing that they settled for low standards. The person who criticizes you for wanting more from life is revealing that they settled for less. This is a cruel but necessary duality to understand. There are those who expand and those who contract. Those who expand want to grow, evolve, improve, conquer. Those who contract want to keep everything as it is, avoid risks, stay in their comfort zone. And those who contract will try, consciously or unconsciously, to make you contract too. But you need to understand something fundamental. They don't do this because they're bad people. They do this because they're afraid. Afraid of being left behind. Afraid of being abandoned. Afraid of having to leave their comfort zone too. Mediocrity loves company. Mediocrity hates solitude. So when you decide to stop accepting crumbs, when you decide to raise your standards, when you decide you deserve more from life and will work to get it, you automatically become a threat to all those who settled for less. You become a constant reminder of what they could be, but chose not to be. And here's a truth that will give you a lot of power. The criticisms you receive aren't about what you're doing wrong. The criticisms you receive are about what you're doing right. Nobody criticizes someone who is failing. Nobody invests energy in bringing down someone who is already down. People only bother to criticize you when you're doing something that bothers them, something that makes them question their own choices. Napoleon Hill noticed that all the extraordinary people he studied had something in common. All of them were severely criticized at some point in their journeys. All of them were called crazy, dreamers, too ambitious, unrealistic. And all of them used these criticisms as fuel to prove the critics wrong. The difference is that these people understood that criticisms were, in fact, confirmations that they were on the right path. They understood that when you bother mediocre people, you're doing something extraordinary. They understood that criticism is the tribute that mediocrity pays to excellence. You're closer than you imagine to making this complete shift in perspective. You're closer than you imagine to becoming immune to others' opinions. You're closer than you imagine to discovering the power that exists within you when you stop expecting it to come from outside. But here's what separates winners from losers at this exact moment. Losers will hear all this, get emotional, get inspired, and then go home and continue doing exactly the same things as always. They'll continue demanding from others. They'll continue expecting someone to solve their problems. They'll continue being victims of circumstances. Winners, on the other hand, will leave this video transformed. They'll understand that transformation doesn't happen tomorrow, it happens now. They'll understand that every moment they spend demanding from others is a wasted moment they could be using to build something. And there's a subtle but fundamental difference between these two mindsets. Losers want the world to change for them. Winners change for the world. Losers wait for circumstances to align. Winners align with opportunities that already exist. You don't need permission to start building the life you want. You don't need approval to pursue your dreams. You don't need someone to believe in you for you to believe in yourself. You don't need perfect conditions to take the first steps. You only need to understand one thing. Nobody is going to do for you what you can do for yourself. Napoleon Hill discovered that there's a moment in the life of every successful person that he called burning of the boats, burning the ships. This is the moment when the person stops leaving, escape doors open, and commits totally to their own success. It's the moment when they stop having plan Bs, plan Cs, backup plans. It's the moment when they put all their eggs in the basket of their own potential. This moment is scary because it forces you to trust yourself in a way you may never have trusted before. But this moment is also liberating because it forces you to discover internal resources you didn't even know you had. When you stop relying on emotional crutches, you discover that your own legs are much stronger than you imagined. And here's a deep psychological truth that few understand. The fear you feel of not having others' support, the fear you feel of having to count only on yourself, this fear isn't about your capabilities. This fear is about your perception of your capabilities. You have much more power than you imagine. You have much more resources than you recognize. You have much more potential than you're using. The only difference between you and the people living the life of your dreams is that they discovered this power before you did. They stopped looking outside for what already existed inside. They stopped waiting for salvation and became their own saviors. But I'll tell you a secret that can dramatically accelerate this discovery process. The loneliness you feel when you stop emotionally depending on others isn't emptiness. It's space. Space for you to truly know yourself. Space for you to discover who you really are when you're not trying to please anyone, when you're not trying to impress anyone, when you're not trying to get anyone's approval. Most people are so afraid of this loneliness that they prefer to live lives that aren't theirs, in relationships that drain them, in jobs that frustrate them, in situations that diminish them, just to not have to face this inner silence. They prefer toxic noise to productive silence. They prefer mediocre company to solitary excellence. But history's great achievers knew something most don't know. Silence is where clarity is born. Solitude is where strength is born. Temporary isolation is where self-sufficiency is born. All great leaders, inventors, artists, entrepreneurs went through periods of isolation where they discovered internal resources they didn't even know they possessed. This is another fundamental duality. There are those who flee from silence and those who embrace silence. Those who flee from silence constantly need external validation, external entertainment, external stimuli. Those who embrace silence discover they have within themselves everything they need to be complete. When you stop needing others to fill your emotional voids, when you stop needing others to entertain you, when you stop needing others to make you feel important, you discover something revolutionary. You discover that you are your own best company. You discover that your own mind is your best entertainment. You discover that your own approval is more valuable than the approval of 1,000 people. But don't be fooled. This doesn't happen overnight. This is a process that's sometimes painful, sometimes uncomfortable, but always transformative. It's like exercising a muscle that's been atrophied for a long time. At first it hurts. At first it's difficult. But over time you get stronger, and during this process you'll discover who is really on your side and who was just taking advantage of your emotional dependence. You'll discover that many of your relationships were based on you giving more than you received. You'll discover that many people were only interested in you when you were available to solve their problems or validate their insecurities. This can be painful at first, but it's liberating in the end. Because when you remove from your life all the people who were just consuming your energy without giving anything in return, you create space for people who truly add value to your existence. You create space for genuine relationships based on mutual exchange of value, not on emotional dependence. Napoleon Hill called this the law of selective attraction. When you change your internal energy, you automatically attract people with similar energy and repel people with incompatible energy. When you stop being an emotional beggar, you stop attracting emotional exploiters. When you become self-sufficient, you start attracting other self-sufficient people. And here's where the magic really happens. When you have a group of self-sufficient people working together, when you have a group of people who don't emotionally depend on each other but choose to collaborate for mutual benefit, you have an unstoppable force. You have true synergy. You have what Napoleon Hill called a mastermind. But to reach this level, you first need to go through the process of becoming complete alone. You first need to prove to yourself that you don't need anyone to be happy, fulfilled, productive. Only then can you choose to have people in your life by desire, not by necessity. Only then can you build healthy relationships based on abundance, not on scarcity. You who made it to this point You who absorbed every word, every concept, every truth presented in this video, you're no longer the same person you were when you started watching. Something changed within you. Something awakened. Something that was sleeping started to move. You're now part of an invisible minority. The minority of people who have the courage to look at reality without filters, without illusions, without self-deception. The minority of people who prefer painful truths to comfortable lies. The minority of people who are willing to do the internal work necessary to transform their external reality. The majority will continue waiting for someone to solve their problems. The majority will continue demanding from others what only they can give themselves. The majority will continue being victims of circumstances, slaves to others' opinions, prisoners of their own mental limitations. But not you. You chose a different path. You chose the path of total responsibility. You chose the path of emotional self-sufficiency. You chose the path that few have the courage to walk, but which is the only one that leads to true freedom. And here's your final declaration. It's not a request, it's not a suggestion, it's not an attempt. It's a declaration of who you are from now on. I choose to be unshakable. I choose to be self-sufficient. I choose to stop waiting for the world to give me what I can give myself. I choose to take total responsibility for my life, for my choices, for my results. I choose to become the person who doesn't need salvation because they are their own savior. I choose to become the person who doesn't beg for opportunities because they create their own opportunities. I choose to become the person who doesn't demand recognition because they find their validation in their own work well done. I choose to be free.